So, Dr. Banerjee, you very rightly pointed out that how women have become victims of violence and abuse. But even in the work sector, more women compared to men have lost their jobs during this pandemic. So, managing work, family, and the pandemic has been really a very tough ride for most women. So, I, being a woman, I would really like to know. So, what do you think has been the greatest impact on the well-being of women during this pandemic?
Yeah, I think, see, how I put it in most of my discussion is that um, there were a series of papers in different journals which spoke of COVID as a great equalizer. Yeah, so I was mentioning, that COVID has always been termed as great equalizer. Now I don't know who invented this term, but I have never heard something as wrong as this. True that in one way we are all in this together, right? But it's also a fact that a lot of people have been disproportionately affected, and there is no doubt about it. Again, if we want, we can stay in as much denial as we want, but that's the truth. And I think people who live in developing countries, lower middle income countries, we have seen that there are different sectors of population who were affected more. Of course, people who are bit underprivileged in terms of socioeconomic status, the migrants, people who did not have jobs, who lost their jobs, not to mention the gender and the sexual minorities, the LGBTQ population, they are all affected. But there are also quite much dividends based on age. So both the children and the elderly have been affected much more. And definitely there is a gender divide. Now, again, see, Tusharika, how I put this is, COVID has not created the gender divide. It has just helped us see it more properly. So the crevices of sexism, racism, ageism, these crevices have become all the more prominent during the pandemic. So let's say that, you already have a bone that got fractured few months back, and you are having a fever, or let's say you are having a viral infection. Now, the zone or the area of your body, which is already weak and vulnerable, will automatically respond to that first, isn't it? Similarly, there has been a gender divide existing in a society. We want to blissfully ignore that's our choice, but it is there. So it's been there. Racism, it has been there. Social stigma related to mental illness, it has been there. Poor response to disaster public health. There is a lot of comparison of COVID with the Spanish flu, with the SARS. There were problems which have repeated now. The only thing that happens is when there is a disaster, all the existing dividends, divides, inequities in the society tend to come on the forefront much more. Now, what can we do about it? The same thing we could have done when COVID did not exist. There is nothing new. But I think when we plan a disaster management, when we plan to have equality in mental health and in health distribution in general, it is important to keep in mind that people who are underprivileged needs to be given that leverage in terms of services. I'm not talking about reservation. I'm not talking about extra services. To give you an example, people who have severe mental illness and are probably not in a state to understand what is good for them are patients who are there in the closed wards who do not have family members to look after them. There is a vaccination drive going on. So whose responsibility is it to ensure that they get an adequate and prioritized vaccination coverage? Us. Similarly, I'm not telling that, this is by no intention to tell that women are in that position in the society, or the aged people are in that position in the society. This is an example to tell that if some sectors have certain vulnerabilities, and we do see that during a crisis situation, those vulnerabilities are getting exacerbated, then the public health responses from all level of stakeholders should target to maintain that health equality in them. And, there have been unique challenges in different cultures, different groups, ethnicities, race, religion, all over the world. And it is not that everywhere, globally, every single country, every single culture, probably there is a gender divide. To give us statistics, probably more men are on the front line because in general, more men work in certain countries. So deaths in frontline workers have happened more in men. But I always feel that looking at it in terms of pure statistics is extremely reductionistic. Because many times you may tell that, okay, women are not dying that much, but then see what are the dynamics change when they are working at home, whether they have lost more people. So, when we talk about dementia, many times this discussion comes that women have greater rates of dementia than men. Why? Because they tend to live longer. So there is something, there are certain factors which are hidden behind crude statistics. Gender or not, age or not, I think whichever sectors or groups in each population and culture have certain vulnerabilities, we need to cater to that holistically.
Absolutely right, Dr. Banerjee. And I would really like to ask you about another very important issue, that is the anxieties we have about our futures. So many of us are really struggling to deal with the fear of losing our near ones, which you have just mentioned. So how do we deal with this anticipatory grief? And secondly, as geriatric psychiatry is your field, how should older couples deal with this anticipated fear of losing their partners? So, could you also tell us at what point they should seek help?
Yeah, see, anticipatory anxiety or grief has been extremely common during the pandemic, especially in the second wave, because the death rate was much more high. What is unique to the pandemic is that if somebody suffers from a terminal illness, you know that there is a timeline. For most, COVID did not give such a chance. I know people who have, been, let's say, they have been admitted to the hospital, and within 24 to 48 hours, they were in ventilator, and then there were no more, unfortunately. So the time to prepare for the loss of your loved one, which is a very important factor in grief and how we deal with grief, that has been missing. The suddenness, the unprecedentedness, the emergency response, all of these are unique to this last 2 years. And the anticipatory grief is maximum when in a family one person is very seriously ill and the other person also has COVID and is quarantined and is not able to be with that person, which has been such a common scenario, because this is an infectious illness and you have to follow the protocols. Again, see, whenever I talk about grief, I tell people that even though there are traditional ways of different stages of grief, it's extremely individualized for each one of us. There is no the right way of grieving. In fact, I was thinking about this yesterday, that many times we keep hearing from a lot of people, you have to be positive. Fair enough. How do I be positive? So that how is where at least I get stuck every time. So when many people, I remember I used to see a couple for quite some time. Both of them were my patients, some 80-year-old gentleman and 74 years old wife. They used to reside in Bangalore. He contracted severe COVID, was in ventilator, and she also had COVID, and their sons are stranded in the US. They don't have anybody, any proximal relative to look after them. So I still remember, and so very fortunately, he ultimately came back. Frankly, none of us expected medically that he will survive. But the day when situation was really critical, and she called me, I'll never forget her words. She told me, the doctor, you have been seeing us for a long time. I did not call you with an expectation of any advice or, with an expectation of staying positive or how do I deal with the situation. I know that within 24 hours, my husband may not be with me anymore. And we have been together for, you know, almost more than 4 decades. I just called because I felt that telling someone that I know that the inevitable thing is going to happen will probably make it better for me to accept it. And these are things which we don't learn, at least in our medical curriculum. You learn this with experience. Uh, Another thing, I remember this, and I always tell about this when I speak experiences related to grief. So during the second wave, there was a farmer family. So they were quite, from the lower socioeconomic status, used to stay in Bellary in Karnataka. And so almost 3 deaths happened in the family. And this gentleman, he lost his wife, he lost his daughter, and the daughter's husband, who was the first person to die. So basically, he had nobody left with him. And we were running a community project at that time in the same district. He was in follow-up with us for some other reason. And inevitably, based on our clinical understanding, we expected that this person will surely go into depression. To our amazement, he dealt with it fantastically well. So we're very interested, that what made this, what helped in the resilience process. So when he told his story, that was very strange, yet really an eye-opener for us. So he showed us one big banyan tree, which used to be there in the center of a very small household that he had. And he told that every day I sit in the evening in front of that and I speak to all my family members. Because for ages together, for generations, we have believed that when somebody dies, the spirits take refuge in that tree. It may sound very silly at one point of time, does not have a scientific or a psychiatric explanation. But the reason why I'm telling this is that grieving ways can be extremely unique. And finally, grieving is not just about the loss or losing a loved one. There can be multiple losses that we have experienced during this pandemic. Loss of job, loss of a lifestyle, loss of structure, loss of being able to go and play outside, which happened for children, loss of hobbies, loss of workspace, and not to mention loss of independence and autonomy, because our fate has been dependent on a virus. So loss can happen in multiple ways, not just by loss of a loved one. But probably, again, the best way to navigate is by being close to the person whom you're trying to grieve, a physical and a social proximity. If at all that is not possible, at least to be in a virtual connect to enhance and maintain your social support. That is extremely important. Even though you feel like you want to grieve alone, the number of people you have with whom you can share your loss, the better it is. And finally, again, if during the process of grief, You feel that it is affecting you for too long. It is affecting your physical attributes. It is leading to significant sleep disturbances. You're feeling suicidal. That is the time when you seek professional help, because probably then grief has transited into depression.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could just say this thing because like the initial tremor for the first from the first wave was something which I experienced quite hard being here in Europe and Germany, and then the aftershock from the second wave was kind of blown out of proportion in India. And what you mentioned during this whole time, yeah, this anticipatory grief and uncertainty was kind of things which kept us numb for a very prolonged time. Um, but now already you mentioned 2 3 points like to cope up with this whole situation. Because if I now would like to summarize this whole narrative of okay, we have this situation and it's going to last for some more time. Um, you mentioned that, yeah, let's say to be in a separate working environment, to have less digital contact when you need your time of relaxation, let's say during your sleep time and all, and having a very fixed schedule. Is there any other coping up strategies which you specifically would like to mention in order to deal with this whole situation? And if you give us like 2 3 let's say good coping strategies to mm, live a normal life in this abnormal time.
Yeah, I think again I would resort by telling that, there is no the normal, the activities which you can practice. Many times, many of us have learned it through times as to what keeps us happy, what keeps us engaged. I would start by telling a few very basic stuff. So
Okay.
one, if possible, have a schedule, have a structure, dedicate some time in the entire day for your physical well-being. It can be yoga, exercise, pranayama, walking, jogging, running, doesn't matter. To
Okay.
do yoga, you don't have to be spiritual. It's a form
Mhm.
of lifestyle, it's not a religion. Maintain a good diet, at least have 7 hours of sleep, nighttime sleep, which is very important. Try have some sort of concordance in your schedule. Like it shouldn't be that, today I am staying awake till 1, tomorrow I am sleeping at 11. And have some time in your entire day that is COVID free. I mean, I always tell that let the virus not infect your lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I have seen that people spend hours on social media or chatting with their friends, but the content is how many people died today and when is the third wave coming.
Yeah.
That is better avoided. And also, misinformation is something which is as harmful as any other illness. So I'm sure that each of us have received thousands of social media messages on innumerable conspiracy theories, how COVID is not a virus, it's a bacteria. This is to be done. These are the remedies. I think it's still continuing related to vaccination. I always prefer to tell this, that have 3 or 4 authentic sources to you.
Mhm.
There is the WHO, the CDC, the National Institute of Health. In India, we have a fantastic website by the ministry, the Indian Council of Medical Research. Spend 15 to 20 minutes in a day, have a fixed time where you would like to seek information,
Mhm.
stay informed, but avoid over information and misinformation. So it should not happen that, in a quest for information, you are sitting with your laptop or your smartphone at 1 o'clock at night and reading about the statistics.
Yeah.
All the things that I have mentioned seem pretty generic and something which you don't need a doctor to say.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, over the last 2 years, I have seen people do the most exotic of stuff. They will find out like some diet which has never been known on YouTube, or they will go for a very amazing Zumba exercise, but they will not practice 15 minutes of walking. So that's the problem, you know. You do whatever you want, whatever you feel helps you, but certain basics should be kept right. I mean, the foundation of your health cannot be on irregularity. And something which I would like to take this opportunity to tell, I tell it to all my friends and colleagues, my family: do something in a day that detoxifies you, that keeps you happy. You know, I think pandemic or not, our life has been so urbanized, globalized, and digitalized that we are too busy to measure. And trust me, this is not philosophical. This includes me as well. Our motivation and our measure of success is very numerical. It depends on how many likes my tweet has, how many followers I have on Instagram, how many people follow me on LinkedIn, how many posts have I been able to share in the last 1 month on Facebook, how many publications do I have, what is my salary. Now, all these things are fine. I'm not telling these cannot be sources of motivation. But I started you by telling that there is a void, you know, psychological void, a void of identity. Now, no matter how many of these you do, at the end of the day, I'm sure every one of us wants a peaceful rest and some time when you can laugh to yourself. So just go ahead, hum your favorite song, dance to your favorite tune, talk to your friends, do something that you like, do something which you have long thought that you will do. Many of my friends have become amazing cooks during this lockdown. I mean, I have myself realized that I can cook for the first time in life. So there are so many things that you can do actually. If you are entrapped and if you're working from home, use the time to do all those stuff. And sometime probably take your eyes off the screen and try and see if you can have some contact with the environment. It really helps. Trust me, it's not something pseudoscientific. It really helps. So like social distancing, I'm sorry, like social distancing, I think digital distancing also needs to be practiced. Or should I put it as digital balance?
Okay. So, I mean, do you consider that detoxification is basically like to keep you somehow completely separated from all these anxiety and all these negative emotions, which is floating along with the pandemic and this unprecedented present of this crisis?
Yeah. So negative, see, again, anxiety, sadness, these are emotions, and anxiety disorders, depression, these are illnesses. You know, they are different. So when you talk about negative emotions during the pandemic, I would suggest that whatever I just discussed about now, that is not exclusive to COVID.
Okay.
If we develop some, let's say, you know, healthy mental health habits during the pandemic, we can carry it forward, COVID or not. See, to just give you a perspective, we always talk about public hygiene, you know, washing hands, wearing masks. If you are returning from a hospital, you should wash hands, you should take a bath. Have you ever heard people talk about mental hygiene?
Even sleep hygiene for that matter.
No, yeah. Sleep hygiene, we don't, still that's a concept called sleep hygiene. You know, still, at least in textbooks, there is. But you talk to somebody about mental hygiene, they will think that you are talking about something either something very foolish or very exotic. So it's nothing. What is mental hygiene? It's like you have to keep your, you know, you have to wash your hands, you have to take care so that you don't get infected. You should also take care so that you are mentally, you know, fit and you are in a state of well-being. And being in a good state of mental well-being does not mean that you are free from an illness. I may not have depression, schizophrenia, dementia, anxiety today. That does not mean that I am in 100% mentally fit. I may be spending hours altogether woken up at night thinking about my job. I may be having the fiercest fight with my family. I may be in so much of stress that I have started dropping my performances in school and college. I may be managing. I'm still not having a depression. But that does not mean that I cannot take professional help and prevent myself from that pre-depression stage to go to the state of depression.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Banerjee. You were talking about hygiene, which brings me, or mental hygiene, which brings me to the point about to ask you about physical hygiene. I mean, we have seen during the pandemic, even now, because this ever-changing situation of localized, pocketed lockdowns, pocketed high rise of incidents. So this ever-changing situation, one thing that we stress on till now would be personal hygiene, which is, and this to the point of obsession. For example, should we take this really very seriously? Some of us are so petrified of using the public transport, meeting large number of people in public spaces, even with 2 vaccines, which the government proclaims to be protecting us really well. It would be our our shield. Obsession about cleanliness, coming home and washing hands. Is it really? Can we term this to be at the point of obsession, or it's like a really necessary part to deal with the pandemic? And when is the point where, okay, this becomes an obsession?
Yeah, I think it's a very pertinent thing to discuss because, many times it has so happened that the practice of fighting contamination measures have almost gone to the extent of being an irregular habit, and a harmful habit, because that degree of uncertainty always stays in your mind that I am never satisfied. And I have seen that not only in patients, in friends, in family, in very close contacts. In fact, I think you all remember that there was a time when there was a rapid panic buying and hoarding of sanitizers and soaps, So, I think the very basic premise of this is that you need to know what should be done. And how do you know that? There are certain websites with very clear details mentioned, which nobody bothers to read. So the World Health Organization, the CDC, both of them have very clear responses in question answer format. To an extent, what should I do when I bring you grocery? What should I do when, I have come up from a visit to somebody who had COVID? What should I do? What should the precautions I be taking? See, there is no absolute precautions. Okay, we can only do so based on epidemiology and based on public health science. Every measure that you take has a degree of protective effect. It can never be 100%. So I think it is important to understand that when I should do what, and based on the changing scenarios, how careful should I be? Does that mean that, okay, there is nothing to fear, I will go and sit in a crowded place and watch a movie? No. But at the same time, I need not sanitize my phone with 3 different sanitizers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think what becomes very important is, if you are seeing that your habit is going to such an extent that it is causing a delay and interference with your daily activities, and undue distress and consistent presence of uncertainty in your mind, again, that is turning into an obsession.
Okay.
And if you are not able to get out of it, you have to take help. Lastly, what should be done as a public health measure should not come from social media forwards. It's written on the net. Okay, because see, this is not a lot of people have approached us, have called us on their helplines, asking that, today I got a message that if you do not take 1 teaspoon of honey every day, you are going to get infected by the virus. For us, it may seem funny, but for people who are in a desperate need, and remember, in a crisis, human mind functions this way, that the easiest cure appears to be the most pragmatic. So there have been instances, not only in India, in many places, where people have gone and hoarded hydroxychloroquine, had them, taken remdesivir by themselves. No matter how angry you get, these are all survival instincts. So as psychiatrists, as public health professionals, our job is only to probably point them out that what can be done and to what extent it needs to be done. Remaining is human tendency. You cannot change.
Little bit scary for me.
Yes. And Dr. Banerjee, like when you were talking about the coping mechanisms, so I would like to point out something which I get to hear a lot about. So people are speaking a lot about how to remain positive, and even in your talk you were mentioning about that. So remaining positive is touted as a well-being booster, but how much should we force ourselves into being positive at any cost? So like my question to you is it important to keep a good balance of positive and negative emotions like sadness and anger, and how should we do it?
Yeah, I think very aptly said. I always lightly say that be positive, don't be delusional. So there are, two aspects to it. So you can't think that, okay, I have 2 doses of vaccination, so I need to cover every single Durga Puja pandal in Kolkata. So that's being a little bit too much of positive. Understanding what a certain behavior has in risk for you, I think gives a lot of perspective. I always, I never, as a psychiatrist, I never tell somebody to be positive, because as I told you, some time back, that it is easy for me to probably prescribe it with a blanket statement on this side of the table. But I know that I can never really be in the other person's shoes. Somebody who has lost a job, somebody who has lost someone, somebody who has been, is living in an old age home and literally does not have anyone to come and see him or her. Telling that person to be positive, it's like somebody who is hungry for 3 days, you don't give the person food and tell be positive. It's like that. As you rightly said, having an optimum balance of emotions is very important. But on the other hand, you can always tell a person that even if you are not able to be positive, do the minimum and take care of your health. Okay, so yes, you have lost someone. I know that you may be feeling terrible. I always tell this to my patients, or even to people whom I meet in similar situations, that to be very frank, many people ask that, do you understand what I am going through? I tell very honestly, no. I don't, because this is not a situation that I am through, and I can only imagine. But having said that, this is not the end to it. And if you really want to navigate this process, the first thing is you need to have at least your body, your physiology moving you ahead. So if you starve, if you don't sleep, if you don't dress properly, if you don't take bath, if you don't take care of your physical hygiene, you will not be in a mentally sufficient state to deal with the agony and the pain that you will be undergoing for the next few months. So that is probably what we can suggest people to do. And as I said, when it's a stressful situation, it is natural to be stressed. If somebody tells that COVID is going on and I am perfectly fine, either the person is lying, or there may be something that he or she is hiding. So yes, there are times when, let's say before an interview, you can tell a person to be positive. But at the time of crisis, how we deal with it, how much our resilience is, depends on how realistically we navigate it. We cannot be positive all the times.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you, especially the example which you set out that just by having 2 shots doesn't make you a Superman in this situation. It is absolutely a very, pragmatic approach to this
But that
talk.
said, I think everybody should go for both the doses of vaccination.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we are living currently in a country where there are protests against that as well. So there are people who has a difference in the opinion, and they think probably vaccine is not the way to go forward. But that probably is another discussion, and I don't want to give into that direction because I am not a follower of them. What I would like to say at this point, that we have already talked a lot about this whole situation and discussed a lot, but for our viewers, I would rather appreciate if you just give, let's say, 1 week approach, or like from tomorrow, or let's say from Monday, I would like to have 1 week. And for this upcoming week, what should be my strategy to be the best I can, or the best I could be? So what are the perfect 7 days look like from Dr. Banerjee, if I am in this situation?
Yeah, so I think, in this situation, by probably you mean that traversing the pandemic, right? In the times
Exactly,
of
yeah.
COVID-19.
And I could imagine that the viewers will be, it's a cluster of people who has already seen a lot, been through a lot. Now they have already got a fathomless knowledge about how to deal with the situation all throughout. But when we try to organize our mind to set out like 1 week plan, just to have a very perfect 1 week, and probably that will be already an onset of a change. How this 1 week you will describe?
Yes, I think at the outset, let me say that there is no perfect week. So again, that is something which many of us think that, okay, I am doing it this way, but is it the right way? That as long as it keeps you safe, it keeps you happy, it gives you certain degree of certainty, just go ahead with it. There is, no need to compare with other person is doing. Secondly, the first thing that I'll tell is, if you really want to do that, don't wait till Monday. Start from 3/27.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first thing, because many times procrastination actually never really takes us to that point where we can really start with certain measures. I would mention 4 things. One, last time that I mentioned everything related to your basic self-care, including having an adequate nutrition, sleep, and an exercise.
Okay.
2, have a balanced usage of your digital activities. And that includes your social media, online education, everything.
Okay.
3rd is, try to strike a personal work balance within the confinements of work from home. And 4th, and most important, all the lessons, all the understandings that you have received with regards to your mental health, please carry it beyond this week to your life.
Yeah, that
helps.
That's really good. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I must say.
Very good takeaways for all of us in these difficult times. So with that, we have actually come to the end of our talk. And thank you very much, Dr. Banerjee, for these insights and your thoughts that you've shared with us. And I'm sure our listeners will gain as much as we have through this discussion. And since the pandemic is far from over, and even otherwise, we hope to see you again in one of our expert talks. Thank you, Piyali, Bitan, and Devanjan for enriching this talk with your questions and sharing your experience. And thank you to all of you who are joining us. The talk with the expert series will continue with new themes, and check out BHRM's YouTube channel and Facebook page for more such content. So until next time, from all of us here at BHRM, we wish you good health and safety. Take care.